right? We want to inspire all of you.
All kinds of acting, theater. It's going to be a great couple of semesters.
Once in a lifetime.
They are your friends. They are my family.
Okay. Hi, thank you for staying, everyone. I'm glad you are here to participate with the discussion. Again, my name is Emily Zwall. I teach ASL here at Oxnard College. Also, I am a counselor for, I am the advisor for the ASL Club. Some of the students are in the ASL Club, and they actually run and lead the club. First, we have Monica Vasquez. Monica is the president of the ASL Club. And sitting on the bigger couch is Emily Cuevas. She is the secretary. Perfect. And then on the other side of her, sitting in the higher chair, Blandy. Am I saying that right? And last name is Duffys. Blanding is the vice president. So these three students are going to be asking questions of our panelists, and I will sit back in the audience and I'm going to let the three panelists introduce themselves. I will introduce the three remaining panelists. First, in the second seat, we have Adriana Nino. She is a teacher here, an ASL teacher. She and I are cohorts. We're both teachers and we're both advisors for the ASL Club. Next to Adriana, we have an OC student. Her name is Karina Rios. Thank you for coming, Karina. And then last, we have our music teacher from Oxnard College. His name is Dr. Scott Wolf. Again, thank you all for coming and being involved, participating in our panel. We're hoping to get different views, your perspectives, and thank you for sharing. Again, the students are going to be leading the rest of the presentations, so one last thing before we get going. First, I want to thank everyone for being here for one, but also we'll have about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation, once this part of the panel is done, for you all to ask questions and get some answers if you would like, okay? All right, and with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. This is Monica. First of all, thank you for coming and being part of the panel discussion. Would anyone like to go first with questions? I just wanted to first ask, what were your overall thoughts about the movie? Is that okay, Amy, if she takes off her mask?
Sure. She's comfortable.
Watching the movie, I have seen it twice now, and the first time that I watched it without sound. And some of parts of the movie I could relate to and others I couldn't. Now, watching it again tonight with sound and also with my hearing aids, plus my cochlear implant, it was a bit of a different experience, much different than the first time I watched it. The movie really was, it touched my heart. I related to it a lot with his experiences. The movie is, I would say, really good for people who have gone through hearing loss. It definitely portrays the fear and frustration as well as confusion that people might experience. People typically go through a lot of different emotions, so that's where I can relate to what the character went through. Similarly, that movie is great for people with hearing loss in terms of not feeling alone. Like, there is a place in the world, and it's okay. Life goes on, hearing loss happens sometimes, and the world still goes on. So it is a really good movie. And this is Karina.
Karina, we're going to give you a mic. Hold on. It's on, Emily. We got it. We're high tech here at Oxnard College.
Okay, I said that I understand. I understand that I live in both worlds. I can understand the movie and I can relate because with my hearing aids on, I'm a hearing person, and then without my hearing aids off, without my hearing aids, I'm deaf. So when I'm deaf, it's frustrating because I'm a lip reader, but when I don't understand a person's mouth, especially with men with hairy mouth, it's hard to read their lips, right? I said, can I borrow a scissor and just, but anyway. And it's interesting because I see his frustration because he came with the exposure of just talking only and hearing, depending on his hearing. And then all of a sudden he loses. So he's frustrated because he can't understand. And I know a lot of hearing people say, oh, what did she say? Oh, what did he say? They want to know, but they won't learn the language. So in that movie, he's like frustrated because he doesn't understand at the dining table. Like everybody talking and he feels left out. So it's really interesting. I see that in the both worlds. So like my sister, I have a deaf sister. She's like, what does the family say? I don't like to go to the family function because I don't understand, they won't sign, and I always have you as an interpreter. And I don't think it's fair because I have to interpret. Sometimes I even miss the joke. I'm like, and I just laugh. I'm like, just laugh, okay? But anyway, yeah, it's really interesting. So it's really a good movie. I agree with you.
Is that me? I've really enjoyed it. And I have seen very few things about the deaf community, and I thought it was really interesting, and I felt like at the beginning his transition felt very isolating, and then as he sort of got better with a new form of communication, I felt like a whole new world opened for him. I thought that was really interesting. And the other thing that's really struck me about the movie was the way sound was used in the movie, mostly because it was almost like it was its own character. So the character was this catalyst for change, and every time sound would come up in the movie, it would often be this very negative kind of stimulus that would be pushing him, almost like it was his drug. And every time it would come up, it would be very uncomfortable, and he would sort of go towards that addiction, and then eventually he sort of overcame that addiction. So I didn't feel like there were no actual drugs in the movie. What I felt like was that the sound was the drug, and this addiction that he had to let go of. So I thought that was a really interesting use of the sound in the movie. And I've seen other movies where the audio in the movie is almost like its own character. I don't know if you've seen a Spike Lee movie called Do the Right Thing, but every time the music comes up loud, conflict happens, right? And the last scene of that movie is this incredible racist conflict. I don't know if this even makes sense to be talking about right now, but the guy walks in with this boombox, and it's like the loudest moment of the movie, and the movie ends, and the conflict ends when they destroy the boombox. And I felt like it was kind of a similar scene when he pulled those off, right? Like they destroyed, he finally like made it through that door. So.
Okay, let's ask one more question. Can you say if Ruben's experiences are similar to your own, or how are they different? Would you like anyone in particular to answer? Okay, it looks like Adriana's going to go. Just to give you some of my own background. My family, I come from a hearing family. They do sign, though. So I grew up being hard of hearing. And when I became about 3 to 5, I had a pretty significant loss. I'm sorry, 35, I had a pretty significant loss with my hearing. And in the last, well, when I became 35, that happened. So I really struggled, particularly with my family dynamics at the dinner table with everyone sitting around speaking. With that sudden loss, I sat around and watched everyone having a dialogue, just talking, and I couldn't relate, because being a deaf person, I didn't understand them suddenly. All the time I was growing up, everybody spoke and signed, but something was different when I had more of a loss. So it became very frustrating. Even now, I have to tell my kids, remind them to sign when they're around me. So sometimes I even have guilt because of that, because it's not their fault. My frustration actually hurts them. So I had to learn how to transition my lifestyle and really just accept myself as a deaf person. But at the same time, I had to learn to relate to them differently. Most of my life, I was a hard of hearing person, and I signed and spoke, but then I became deaf, and so whereas before they could call my name and I would answer, that changed. So they weren't used to that either. So even without hearing aids before, if they'd call my name, I would look. So them seeing me frustrated was frustrating for them, and they couldn't quite relate to the loss I'd had, the more profound hearing loss. So it took some adjustment in terms of getting family to use more deaf cues, like turning on and off the lights or using sign more consistently. That movie showed some of the experiences that Ruben went through in terms of depression, even abuse, and I've experienced that. I've experienced some depression. I became more withdrawn, especially from hearing family. I didn't want to hang out with my partner's friends. And I made a lot of excuses for reasons that I didn't want to go. And it would end up in an argument because no one quite understood why I didn't want to participate. And I didn't share my feelings because I wasn't ready to dig into those feelings, if you will. I didn't really know what was bothering me. It was just a bit of a different journey becoming this deaf person. I was sort of between worlds, especially like ordering food. I'd been able to go through the drive-through before, and I should say I do have a deaf brother. And suddenly I had to ask, well, what did they say? And he's like, I don't know what they said either. And it became very impactful. So I had to cry. I had to grieve for that, and I had to take my own time. My brother went through that too, a lot of the communication misunderstandings in family circles, and I know Karina has a deaf sibling too. And even in that situation where Karina finds herself interpreting for her other deaf family member, I've done that as well. So I asked him if he felt like he missed a lot growing up, and he said he did, but he had already accepted that, whereas I hadn't. So my experience was different than his. Now it's been 5 years since I had that more extreme hearing loss. And I realize now that there's nothing wrong with using different forms of communication, like writing things down, using text. I think before I experienced a lot of denial, but now I'm more accepting of who I am and who I've become. But it was a struggle. So, yeah. Karina, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, we grew up together, and we always, we hear more than other people. Oh, sorry, great. We grew up together, and, we were the only one who hear more, so she would hear more on the phone than I can. But when it's time to order, we would go out, eat dinner, and I would talk, and she would get really shy. I said, but you hear, what did they say? I don't know. It's like a blind leading the blind, but in a deaf way. So we always had funny moments. And I think we need to educate the people, like, being deaf, it's not a disease, it's not being dumb, it's just, you just can't hear, right? And the bright side of it, if someone doing yard work or construction, you can sleep through it. So that's the best part. So
that is true.
pretty much, we have a lot of similarities because we're in the same area, and the Mexican culture are very gossipy, very like put you on the side, and we know that feeling. So I wasn't surprised when my sister was born deaf because I already knew the language myself. So I taught my deaf sister sign language. Then she grew up, she learned American Sign Language. She was teaching me to sign American Sign Language, which is a lot easier because I'm signing word by word. My grammar is better than ASL, so it's just really hard for me to sign ASL. So, yeah.
Thank you. This is Monica. Did you want to ask the next question?
Would you like to answer that question too, Professor?
Sorry, Professor Wolf, would you like to answer that question as well?
About how the movie applied to me personally? I don't know how much that movie applied to me personally. I might skip on that one.
Okay, great. Now another question. After Ruben spent time in the deaf school, he was at one point in the movie sitting with Joe, and Joe asked him about their beliefs within the house, and he used the line that said that they don't see deafness as a handicap. What are your thoughts on that? And do you agree or not?
Deaf is not handicapped, right? You're not broken. It's just you don't have all your 5 senses. You just can't hear. But have you noticed, Ruben? He can hear. His eye got bigger. The same thing I do when I can't hear. My eyes get bigger because I feel like if I open my eyes, I can hear more. So I don't know if that happened to you, but it does for me. And it's how you want to see things, how you want to accept things around you. If you want to accept yourself as a deaf person, good. If you want to make better changes to able to hear your loved one, well, I understand, that's good. It's not a wrong thing to do. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, okay, sure.
That line where they talked about deafness not being a handicap, I had to think about that for quite a while. Like Karina just mentioned, everyone has 5 senses, typically. We as deaf people are missing one, but when you think of whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, they think that, okay, you're a hearing person, you have 5 senses. That's one kind of person. But usually people that are called handicapped, disabled, are missing something, whether it's hearing or sight. But we're not handicapped. We still are able to do just about anything. We're still able to run and jump, and so when we think of deafness as a handicap, it's negative in that it implies something missing. So I do understand both perspectives, but whether you're calling it disabled or handicapped, it's a really sticky, difficult situation, and it's been pondered for years and years and years. And I think we'll continue to do that.
Okay, I'm the musician, and I guess I have to go with the cliche that everyone knows that, one of the most famous composers in the whole world, Beethoven, went deaf in his 30s or so. And maybe, he struggled for many years with that, and he felt like it was a curse for a long time. But in the end, most of the best things he did with music were after he became deaf, not before. Often before, his music was a lot like what he heard from all the other composers around him. And going deaf, in a way, set him free because he stopped, perhaps, taking so much from outside himself and kind of allowed whatever happened, whatever change in perspective that caused, to allow him to do things that no one had ever done before with music. And I have to imagine that anyone with a major change compared to those around them of the way they experience the world gives them the opportunity to then do something no one else does because no one else feels it the way they do. So I can't see that being a handicap because there's so much chance that it's going to do something amazing.
So not cliche, by the way.
Okay, this is Monica. Let's go on with the next question. In the movie, Ruben and Lou, their relationship changed throughout. How did you see their relationship? What do you think that they learned from each other? And are you asking anyone in particular? Okay, this is Adriana. Watching the movie and their relationship, I could relate to them a lot. Because that's happened to me. It's happened to my relationship. And just looking at that from my own culture too. For example, we try to work things out as things change, even with my family relationships. My partner and I, we both sign, and she can see when I'm frustrated and I want to go back to who I was as a hard of hearing person growing up, where I could actually hear things. I didn't have to struggle so much. And then I say to myself, it's okay, you know, I am who I am, and she is who she is. Often when I thought, well, I haven't accepted myself yet, I couldn't hear things in certain ranges, and I tried so many different things, but I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. And she'd often tell me that I needed to learn that, you know, I'm still figuring this out, whether it's, you know, learning to sign more fluently, or accepting that music isn't a larger part of my life, or that, you know, my family are who they are, and I was going to have to attend birthdays like, you know, quinceañeras and whatnot, but that music would be different for me. You know, usually my family culture is very musically inclined, so it was frustrating. And I learned to accept that and try to learn who I am in this new way. And like I said, in the last 5 years, I've realized that with the use of my hearing aid, a strong hearing aid, I've started to see if I can do different things. For example, I went to an audiologist. I got a hearing test done, and they told me that I had a loss of about 30% residual hearing. I was always deaf in my left ear, but I had about 30% left in my right ear. And I know that was a big number. So that's like a 70% decibel loss, which is severe. And they told me that hearing aids would not work for me. So,
I think it's better.
good, thank you. So I was just completely shocked. And I cried in the booth. If you've ever taken a hearing test, you're in this booth. And the audiologist had known me for a long time, and they left me in the booth for like 15 or 20 minutes so I could just bawl my eyes out in there and think about it. And at the time, I was an interpreter for an elementary school. And that's the first thing I thought. My job, what about my job? And that just made me cry even more. So the audiologist left me in there and came and got me after a while. She gave me some time. And like I said, the first thing I thought was, what am I going to do about my job? I can't do this anymore. I have to actually look for another job. And that's what she said. She said, well, it's time to look for another job. So I couldn't interpret anymore. I knew I couldn't do that job anymore. And I started telling people that, and they thought, why? Like, for example, my boss. I had to have a talk with my boss, and I said, I have such a profound loss now that I can't. So they started to look for different positions for me. And I tried a couple over the next 6 months, but nothing fit, nothing worked. So I eventually decided to leave. And again, this is where I learned a lot about myself. It was tough. It was not easy. But their relationship and their subsequent breakup, I believe, is he met Lou as a hearing person, not a hard of hearing or a deaf person. And that changed. Their communication style would have had to change. How would they, would they have to write back and forth? Or there's just so many things to consider, and how much that relationship changed for both of them. So I understand and I see why they broke up. It was sad, of course. And it was nice to see that they seem to be still there for each other, and those emotions don't go away. But I think that there was some gratefulness for her or him supporting each other.
Okay, about Lou and Ruben, what I find interesting that they both are willing to take the risk to find resources that will help Ruben, which is a good thing. But at the same time, they both grew apart because he realized that Lou is happy in a different life. And she's right about Lou couldn't accept him as a deaf person, or maybe she's embarrassed because of the cochlear on his head, or maybe they might have more struggles. In this life, we have so many different resources. Life has a solution, but death. You know what I mean? Like, for example, hearing aids is a solution. Interpreters is a solution. Teachers that can put closed caption it's a solution. When I'm on my Zoom, I tell the teacher, do you mind if you can put closed caption? They're always really good about that, helping me with my schoolwork. And so they always make sure you need an interpreter for your classes, or even to visit the nurse out here. They offer interpreting service, so it's really great. And I see why they split up, but if Lou thought a little bit different, or if she would research more that there's a different way how to help each other, I think they would have stayed together. But then it depends on each person. So.
I
Great.
guess my sense of their relationship was that it was not a good one. I felt like through their whole time together, their whole time together, it's okay? Yeah, I had the sense that they weren't a good couple. Oh, I'm okay. You guys hear me okay? It's fine, right? Yeah, I had the sense that they found each other and helped each other at the beginning of their relationship. He helped her with the death of her mom. She helped him with his struggles with addiction to heroin, right? And then they kind of perhaps used their travel and their music to help fill whatever void was there for both of them, to help them. So they have this constant migration, which kind of helps you never have to face anything for very long, right? You have to keep moving so that your problems can't catch up with you, right? And then eventually something happened that stopped the run, right? That stopped them from running anymore. They were forced to stop. And when they finally stopped, it kind of came across that they were both different people by then, and that his deafness changed him, and she kind of realized that maybe she had healed, but wasn't moving on, and so was still doing her scratching or whatever it was, even when they were together, because they were still in this cycle of running away from their problems and kind of being crutches for each other, which I think my psychologist parents would have called codependent. So I think that having the deafness actually happen was like the big wake-up call for them, that things needed to change. And him letting her go when he saw she was happier not returning to that life was a big moment for him, was a moment that really showed that he had grown and that he was ready to let her go, and that their relationship had been in some ways positive, but was ready to be done and move on to the next point in their lives.
Okay, great. Emily, oh no, I have the next question. Do you think that Ruben feels that he belongs in the deaf community or the hearing community?
I think Ruben thought he wanted to go back to his old life, his normal life, trying to fix his ear to go back to the hearing world. But then at the end, he accepted that he was deaf and tried to help and make a difference in the deaf world.
Ms. Adriana? Just going to read the wording of the question. At the end of the movie, when we saw Ruben, he seemed to understand that he was a deaf person with or without the cochlear implants. And he had struggled with his deaf identity or with his hearing identity because he was definitely in the middle. He was able to speak. And usually when you can speak, people assume that you can also hear. So they speak rapidly. And Ruben would have been at a loss, definitely, because he's relying on lip reading. And so it gets confusing. And then people get confused when they're trying to communicate with you because they're like, wait, you just talked. I thought you could hear. So there's a lot of going back from that. I experienced some of that before my profound hearing loss. And then suddenly, you know, I had this major loss and people wanted to speak to me as if they always had. And I, at that point, got hearing aids, and that helped. Whereas I think Ruben will always struggle to find where he fits, where he belongs, whether that's deaf community or hearing community. And I've struggled with that myself. Often in the deaf community, people say things like, but you're more hearing than deaf, or you're a hearing person. And that's not how I see myself at all. You know, I do have a hearing family, but a deaf brother or sibling. So where do I fit? I have potential to use my voice. I can use my voice and speak for myself. So that gives me some inroads into the hearing community, but I will never understand 100%. I will always struggle in both of those worlds. And I think Ruben is the same, that he will always struggle, whether he's a deaf person or a hearing person, he's right in the middle. I've been through that myself. So it's an interesting experience. Okay. Okay, nothing from Dr. Scott there. How about next question? At the end of the movie, we see Ruben. What do you think will happen with him? Will he come back to the deaf community or not? Adriana, are you going to answer? Did you want to answer, Adriana? Yes, I can. I was just thinking about it. And Karina, if you want to start, you're welcome to.
Well, I'll let you think more so I can talk. I think the ending was, it left me like curiosity. And maybe he's gonna go back to the deaf community and work with kids. Because I noticed he was smiling a lot when he was playing with the kids, showing them how to play the drum. So maybe he'll be a great example, like be the big brother.
I completely agree with Karina's statement. I think that he will find some happiness there. He'll learn how to use his eyes more and maybe rely on his cochlear somewhat, but the movie showed that even with a cochlear, sound is very distorted, and that's absolutely the case. I've experienced that myself. After getting a cochlear implant, I went through some of that, and I remember looking, I saw my dog barking at a cat and the cat meowing, and I knew that those things didn't sound like that. So there was definitely a disconnect between the way I knew things sounded and what they actually sounded like in my head with the cochlear. So I already knew that that was going to happen, though, because I'd had hearing aids, and I started out with very small ones and then had to get more powerful ones over the years. So the sound would change every time I got a new hearing aid. So I was somewhat prepared for that. Now, Ruben, he had a shock. He thought he was going to get this surgery and it was going to help everything. It's odd how robotic the sound seems with a cochlear implant, and that was his experience, which did not meet his expectations. He thought he was going to have this surgery and it was going to fix everything. His hearing would be back to normal, and he didn't realize that that was not going to be the case. I do wish the movie would have explained a little bit more about, or even continued following his journey. Not really so much whether he finds the hearing community or the deaf community, but whether he becomes a role model potentially for deaf kids, or he just if he just gets rid of the cochlear implant and learns to sign completely, immerses himself in the deaf community potentially. So I would have liked to see a little more of that.
I love what you all said. I think you kind of answered it with the last question, which is he's always going to straddle two worlds, right? So he's always going to go back and forth between those two worlds. And I like the idea that that was the first step with him taking off the implants, and like he had found his stillness that his sort of teacher had talked to him. Was his name Joe? Joe had talked about finding that stillness, and I think he found that first stillness. But like anything in life, you have to keep working at it. And there are days that are where you find that stillness, and there's days where you don't. And especially in that world that he's, like you said, you're always somewhere in between. So one day's good, one day's bad. And I actually really liked how they ended it. It was like the first time that he looked really, truly calm and settled. So I thought it was like a beautiful moment. And I figure in an hour or two, he'll be a mess again. But he'll find that calm and keep coming back there. So, I really liked how it ended.
That's a good point. And I also wanted to add, I like that you said he found that silence, that stillness. I should tell you that back in June, I actually got a cochlear implant. And for a couple of months, like any little noise, whether it was the neighbor or a dog barking or anything, I realized I can hear all that stuff. Even a woman saying, "Hi, how are you?" But she was quite a ways away from me, and I could hear that. So the world became really loud and really bright, and my brain was processing that stimulation constantly, which is overwhelming. And at some point I realized I needed to take the devices off for a couple of hours and give myself a break. And then I could go back to it when I was ready to start processing that information again and deal with all the noise and the crying and the talking and everything, the traffic and all of that noise, until I learned that my brain could start to recognize things like I had before. So I started picking up a lot more sounds and started learning to recognize them. And some of that was amazing, and some of it's still overwhelming. Sometimes I'm tired of hearing things, so it's a nice position to be in. When I want to, I can remove those, and I'm completely deaf. So, you know, I can be out walking, you can be calling my name, and I will not hear you. You'd have to run to catch up with me. So it is kind of nice to have both of those options. And this is Monica, and she's saying, great, these are great answers. Are there any more follow-up questions? And if there's not, we can open it up to audience questions. If you want to just raise your hand, if you have a question, we can bring you a mic.
I have a question that came in from someone watching on YouTube. We can start with that one. He's a handsome guy, because he's also my husband. So this one's for you, babe. He asked, when people lose their sight, they say that their hearing becomes more keen or acute. He's interested to know if there's a sense that improves or what senses do improve when you're losing your hearing or once a hearing loss happens. I think Karina wants to answer.
I'm not going to lie, but when I don't have my fifth sense, it's my ears, right? I can tell when my mom used to work 3 jobs. One, she would work in the fast food, and she comes home from work, and she said, oh, I'm so tired, I took care of this old lady. Then hey, you have ketchup. You went to McDonald's without me? It's not fair. So my nose became really strong, and then I remember I had a friend who liked to smoke, and he tried to quit smoking. And he said, no, I did so well. I haven't smoked for hours or for days. And then I get close to him. I'm like, you lie. You just smoke like a few hours. And you brush your teeth. I can smell the mouthwash. I can smell the cigarette and your cologne. So stop lying. You know, it's like you can't trick a deaf person. You know, so that's what it really does improve one of your senses. So like my eyes, if I want to hear louder, but if I don't care, I'll be like, you know.
I think you were in my class, Karina. I'm trying to think back if the eyes were wide open or not.
So that really helped me, you know, when I know I smell something, so it's just my expertise. So maybe I should work for the canine. Just kidding.
Other questions from the audience? I'll bring you a mic. Aaron, meet me on the end. You can be loud. Go ahead. Oh, perfect. Smalls, thanks.
I know none of you. I know. There it goes.
Now you're screaming at us, Aaron.
I know none of you can speak to other differing ability groups, but I'm curious why you think, perhaps in the deaf community, why there are kind of 2 sides. The people who accept it, whether that was initially or later on, and then the other ones who want to change or fix their lack of hearing. I'm curious. I read about it a little bit, and it does seem to be quite divided, and I don't know about other differing able groups, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on why that might be in the deaf culture.
Just to make sure that this is Adriana, just to make sure that I got your question clearly. Are you talking about different perspectives on having like cochlear implants or using devices, or what was the other perspective?
I would say yes. Like in the movie, how there was the group of people who were in the house and they were accepting of their differing level of abilities, and then Ruben wanted to change and therefore he wasn't allowed to stay in the house. I've read that that is fairly prominent in the deaf culture, not just the movie. So I'm curious if any of you have any perspectives or maybe hypotheses as to why that might be the case.
This is Adriana. Well, if we're in the past, many doctors believed that things like cochlear implants would work on very young children, like babies. So they implanted them early, and then people started to to think, well, maybe children and people in general should have the option and not leave that hearing status up to a doctor rather than make it a personal choice. So instead of implanting a baby basically at birth, the perspective started to be like giving them all the options. Give the parents choices. And that didn't mean just one choice and the only choice was a cochlear implant, but give them the opportunity to have resources rather than just cochlear implants are the only option. And kind of dismissing all of the other options. So that medical model wasn't correct. Instead, I think things have moved more to giving parents lots of different perspectives. I mean, the cochlear implant isn't the end-all be-all, and it's not for everyone. Some people are perfectly fine with it, and others learn to sign. They're more proficient at it. So it really depends on the child. So that's just my perspective on those, the differences in the two camps, I'd say.
Emily's asking a question.
This is Emily. So if people have choices, and one of the choices was to get a cochlear or not to get a cochlear implant, why do some people decide to actually have the surgery and other people don't?
Oh, I don't have cochlear implant, but I don't think everyone qualifies for the implant. You have to have a certain number to qualify. That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. You have to have, well, it has, I'm sorry, I should clarify, this is Adriana. I learned that people who qualify for cochlear implants, they have to go through an MRI to see if you have any nerves left in the cochlea or in the ear canal. So if there are some nerves still there, you would qualify for the surgery, but if not, then the surgery would be ineffective. And now, to answer your question a little bit better, I understand it better now. Some people are, they don't want cochlear implants because they're fine being deaf. They're fine having silence in their world, and they don't need sound. Whereas other deaf people might just be curious, or they had more hearing previously, potentially, and they want to go back to that. So that's where choices come in. Whether you don't want an implant or you do, some people still sign while they have implants too. So thank you for clarifying that question.
Can I just do a similar follow-up? The movie seems to be saying, though, that it's a bad thing. That, to me, is a message I take away, that getting the implant is wrong. Is the movie doing it a disservice by only really showing that side of it? That's the question. A hearing person watching is thinking, well, oh, he shouldn't do it. But people are doing it, and it seems to work. And what Adriana's saying is that it can be an important part of somebody's life. So is the movie, I'm not sure, is the movie distorting the implant, or are they trying to empower the deaf community? That's the question.
The movie, I think it's because it's like recovery home, from addiction. And Joe looked sad when he got the implant because he wanted Ruben to accept for being deaf. It's not about, oh, you got your cochlear, we're gonna kick you out. It's more about, Joe was disappointed, like, come on, give yourself a try. Give yourself an opportunity to meet the silent world. But Ruben was so desperate, like, no, I want it now. That's Ruben.
And to answer your question, Amy, I think you're right that the movie did make getting a cochlear implant, especially in the way that Ruben did it, made it look negative because it definitely wasn't part of the program that he was in. They emphasized learning sign and learning to become a deaf person and, giving himself a chance in that realm and accepting himself for who he was. He might, find himself later, but I don't think it's an accurate portrayal to say that if a person got an implant, they would be kicked out of a place like that or out of the deaf community. It does happen. And like I said, I have a cochlear implant. I can take it off or on. I'm still deaf. But Ruben is a little bit different because he didn't grow up with any loss at all, with any hearing loss at all. So it's a really interesting perspective. I'm going to have to actually think about that a little bit more later.
Thank you. Other questions? Don't be shy. Good, I need some steps.
I have a question for you, Dr. Wolf. Suppose you experienced a hearing loss. Say you woke up like Ruben one morning and you couldn't hear very well anymore. Do you think that you would be like Beethoven or like Ruben? And then, second question. What would you, if you say you woke up like Ruben one day, how would you be different than him? How would you do things differently than he would?
That's tough. First thing is, I felt like the sense I got from the movie was that music was no longer an option for Ruben. And then we see it a little like he's reclaiming it a little bit. But I have the sense that if you still have music in your mind and in your body, that you can still create, you can still play. I think there are lots of ways to still experience those things. If it was sort of a sudden thing and I had already experienced that world, I think I would find ways around. I think I would find solutions to the problems, to the things that I missed. And I also think that a fair amount of music is in your body too. So it's not just in your ears, it's also in vibrations you feel in your body. They used to say that Beethoven would lay his head on the piano because he could still feel the vibrations through his body, and that low vibrations were still something you could sense. So I think that's another avenue that I think I would try and explore, is the tactile side of music. And then, music can go with sight. There are just a million ways that I think I would find ways to still experience the thing that I loved, my artwork, right? And playing.
Do you think you play a lot of guitar, Scott? Do you think feeling
Yes.
the playing of the guitar?
Yeah, I think the feel of actually playing wouldn't change. I'd still be able to play. And I could use an electronic tuner to make sure that I was still in tune. And I think there are ways around any kind of difficulty. So I think I would be looking for avenues the whole time. And then also, you feel the vibration of the instrument. Well, I'm a guitarist, so I feel I love the feeling of the instrument against me and the way that it vibrates. And I don't know if it would bother me that much if I couldn't hear what was coming out, as long as I had a good picture in my mind of what I was trying to communicate.
Have you ever tried it?
No, but I'm tempted to try. And then if I were Ruben, I don't know.
Would you learn sign language?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to learn sign language just watching the movie. I was so upset watching them have their meal and I couldn't understand any of the jokes. I was like, why aren't we seeing words of what's being said in sign as we watch this? I was upset. But I love language anyway. Music is a language. I love Spanish. I studied Spanish for a long time, so I speak Spanish. I love language anyway. So yeah, absolutely, it's the moment that I realized I didn't have one form of communication, I would certainly want to attack another one as soon as possible, right?
We have time for maybe one more question.
Mr. Wolf, don't worry. If you become deaf one day, just remember you can smell ketchup, okay?
Yes. I always wondered if, because you guys are always watching people's facial expressions, maybe you can like see lies, like human lie detectors. Can you do that too?
Oh, I imagine the nonverbal communication.
All those
Yeah.
nonverbal cues. Extra, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, let me say thank you to all of you joining us. We really appreciate it. Words of wisdom, people at home watching it live, thank you for being with us. And the recording will be made available. So audience, thank you for being here. Our first show in 19 months. A round of applause. I think it was a great success. Yes, very nice. Very nice. We appreciate all of you for being so personal, telling us about your lives. The ASL Club students, did they just do a great job or what? So I'm going to call on you every couple of months to get ready for an event because you got an A+++++++. Thank you for being with us tonight. How cool was it to see a movie again? It's been a long time since we've seen a movie. So have a great evening. Drive home safely. And thank you, Emily. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Rocio. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Jeremy.